Hello and welcome back. I don't know if it's just my family, but this winter's been a real you-know-what when it comes to colds and flus. We've been sick 4 times since November. Better late than never, I've decided to finally fight back, and I'm using an old family recipe to do it. This is Arroz Caldo, or lugao, as it was known in my house. I know that there's technically a difference between the two, and I'll leave it to the food historians to battle that out. It didn't matter in my family, we used the terms interchangeably. It was my mother's secret weapon, a dish she'd pull out at the first sign of a sniffle or cough. Kind of like a cross between chicken soup and rice pudding, the secret to Arroz Caldo's effectiveness, at least according to my mom, was ginger. And I'm inclined to believe her. It may just be a placebo effect, but I always felt a little better after eating a steaming bowl of Arroz Caldo, no matter how sick I was. Because it's a variation on chicken soup, it of course starts with chicken, breast in this case. You could of course use a more flavorful cut, such as thighs, and I've even seen Arroz Caldo made with wings. But my mother used chicken breast, and since I'm using her recipe as a guideline, I'll use it too. Plus, chicken breast is healthier than thighs and wings, so it kind of makes sense. To help keep the breast from drying out, I'll be poaching it in a broth containing ginger root, of course. That's about a 3-inch or so piece there, plus half a lime, a tablespoon of whole black peppercorn, and 2 tablespoons fish sauce. Alright, first, I apologize for the camera angle. In my last video, I mentioned the fact that I didn't have a tripod. I've since purchased a tripod, but now I have the problem of figuring out how to position it around my stovetop without it seeming like the camera's about to fall in. I'll figure it out for next week. Okay, so what I did here was I put the chicken into a pot, then filled it with enough water to fully submerge the meat. I then removed the chicken, added unpeeled ginger, which I sliced into thin strips, and brought it to a simmer. Once there, I added the remaining poaching ingredients, including squeezing in some lime juice before I dropped the lime in. I let this simmer for about 5 minutes. Next, I dropped in the chicken, which I also cut in half so they'd fit better into the pot. Totally optional, of course. You could just use a bigger pot than I did. Once the chicken was in, I let it simmer for another 5 minutes, then I clapped on a lid and took the pot off the heat. I let the entire thing come down to room temperature. Cooking the chicken gently in this manner results in a much more tender and juicy meat than if you were to simply boil it. You can't really tell from the shot, but I ended up with chicken that was perfectly cooked and not even remotely dry. Even better, I also had a beautiful amber broth that had deep gingery, chickeny flavor with just a little hint of lime sharpness. Admit it, just looking at that broth already makes it feel better, doesn't it? That's about 4 cups worth, by the way, which is exactly how much I wanted. Once the chicken had cooled down, I cut it in bite-sized chunks and set it aside to work on the rice. And that began with some base aromatics. These were 2 shallots, chopped small, and about a heaped tablespoon each of minced ginger and garlic. After I took the shot, I actually ran through the garlic and ginger again with my knife to mince them finer because I wasn't quite happy with their size. And you can, of course, swap onion for the shallot. My daughter does not like onion and will dry heave at the mere sight of them, so I use shallot because it's easier to hide. Next, of course, is rice. I used medium grain rice, which I find to be a nice middle ground for stickiness and texture. Some people like to go half and half short grain and long grain, which is fine too. I wouldn't recommend going entirely with short grain though, as that could turn the Arroz Caldo gluey and mushy. Alright, hang on to your seat because we're back at the stovetop. The actual making of the rice is very much like making a risotto. Add a little oil to a pot, then threw in the aromatics. I let that cook for a minute to soften everything and allow the flavors to infuse the oil. Next, in went the rice. Unwashed, that's very important. In a departure from my mother's recipe, I fried the rice a bit first, just like making a risotto. The reason is the same, to impart a little flavor to the rice and delay the release of starch from the grains to get a creamier texture. After about a minute of frying, I added the chicken broth. Once that reached a simmer, I put on a lid and let it cook for about 20 minutes until the rice was done. I stirred it every few minutes just to make sure the rice didn't stick. When the rice was close to finished, I added the chicken and let it continue cooking. And here's the rice, just about done. As you can see, I added a ton of black pepper because I really like black pepper. I also had to add about a cup of extra liquid in the form of cold water because the rice wasn't quite there yet and it was getting a little dry for my liking. If you make this dish, be ready to make similar adjustments. Alright, now I get to add some fun to the dish in the form of garnish. This not only makes the Arroz Caldo pretty, it also adds texture as well as extra flavor. As you can see, I use thinly sliced slivers of garlic, about 6 cloves worth, and some chopped green onion, about 4 stalks. I fried the garlic in some oil over low heat. Once the garlic was lightly toasted, I removed it and let it drain for a few minutes on a paper towel lined plate. Then I threw it into a bowl with the green onions. As I did this, some inspiration hit and it dawned on me that I could kick the garnish up a notch. So I added about a tablespoon of panko breadcrumbs for even more texture, and a dash of toasted sesame oil, both for flavor and to bring it all together. Unfortunately, I'd already shot everything and I wasn't about to remake the garnish. Sorry. And here's a finished dish. Arroz Caldo, aka Lugao, featuring tender chicken, creamy rice, a rejuvenating broth, and of course, it's absolutely packed to the brim with life-giving, virus-slaying ginger. Totally delicious, totally healthy. The only thing it needed was a little garnish of crispy garlic and some zingy green onion, and it was ready to be devoured. Traditionally, there'd also be a hard-boiled egg served with it, but my daughter feels the same way about hard-boiled eggs as she does onions, so that was no go. That's it for the Arroz Caldo. Now, I'm gonna take my bowl and go pick a fight with Old Man Winter. Thanks for watching. I'll see you next week.